Look, have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and within minutes, they know things? They know who's nervous. They know who's lying. They know who actually likes them and who is pretending. They know who holds the power and who is desperately trying to appear like they do. And they do all of this without asking a single question, without a single word exchanged. You've met this type of person, and something about it feels almost unsettling. Like they have access to information you don't. Like they're reading a page of a book you didn't know existed. Maybe you've wondered, how? Is it intuition? Experience? Some rare gift they were born with? No. It's psychology. Specifically, it's 3 dark psychology techniques that most people never learn because most people were never meant to learn them. Today, I'm giving all 3 to you. Not theories. Not guesses. Documented psychological principles used by intelligence analysts, behavioral scientists, criminal investigators, and the most socially intelligent people alive. By the end of this video, you will never see a conversation the same way again. Because once you learn how to read people at this level, you cannot unlearn it. And the third technique, the one most people overlook completely, is the one that will change how you see every human being you interact with for the rest of your life. Let's begin. Before we get into the 3 techniques, I need to explain something that most people get completely wrong about reading people. They think it's about looking for a single sign. One crossed arm. One look away. One hesitation. And they think that single sign tells them the truth. Big mistake. Here's the truth about human behavior. People are not simple. People are layered. People have habits, histories, nervousness unrelated to you, physical discomfort, cultural backgrounds. A person who crosses their arms might be cold. A person who looks away might be remembering something. A person who hesitates might be thinking carefully, not lying. Reading people correctly is not about finding one signal. It is about reading a system of signals, and that is the foundation that every serious behavioral scientist builds their work on. Think about it. A doctor doesn't diagnose a patient based on one symptom. A single fever means almost nothing. But a fever, combined with a specific rash, combined with fatigue, combined with a particular timeline, now you have information. Now you have a diagnosis. Reading people works exactly the same way. You're not looking for a single sign. You're looking for clusters, multiple signals appearing together, reinforcing each other, telling the same story from different angles, and you're always comparing what you see against a baseline. That word baseline is the foundation of everything I'm about to teach you. Keep it in your mind. The first technique is called baselining. It is the single most important skill in the entire science of reading people. Without it, every other technique fails. With it, everything else becomes dramatically more powerful. Here is what baselining means. Every person has a normal, a resting state. A way they naturally look, sound, move, and behave when they are completely relaxed and under no particular pressure. This is their baseline, and the only way to know when someone is behaving unusually is to first know how they behave usually. Think about it. If I tell you a man looked away when I asked him a question, what does that mean? I don't know. Maybe he always looks away when he thinks. Maybe it's a habit. Maybe it's cultural. Or maybe he was uncomfortable and trying to hide it, without knowing his baseline, without knowing how he normally behaves. That single observation means nothing. But if I tell you I spent 10 minutes talking to that man about neutral, comfortable topics, his weekend, his favorite food, things he has no reason to feel anxious about, and during that time he consistently maintained eye contact, spoke at an even pace, and used open, relaxed body language, and then, the moment I asked about a sensitive topic, he looked away. Now that means something. Now I have something to compare against. Now the deviation tells me a story. This is base, and most people skip it entirely. They jump straight to looking for signals without first establishing what's normal for this specific person. Let me give you a real example. I was once in a meeting where one man was under serious pressure. Everyone else at the table was calm, engaged, contributing. He was quiet, slightly fidgeting, not looking at the person speaking directly. His responses were slower than usual, just by a second or two. The other people in the room didn't notice, because they had no baseline for him. But I had spoken to him many times before. I knew his normal. I knew he was fast-talking, confident, direct, with steady eye contact. What I was seeing in that meeting was a completely different person. Something was wrong. After the meeting, I found out he had received serious personal news that morning. Without the baseline, I would have had no idea. With it, the information was obvious. Now, here's how you establish a baseline in any situation. The first thing you do when you enter a conversation, especially one where the stakes matter, is spend time in low-pressure territory. Ask about neutral things. Things the person has no reason to be defensive, anxious, or dishonest about. Their commute, their weekend, something they enjoy, something they know well, and while they talk, you watch. You listen. How do they naturally hold their body? Are their hands open or closed? Do they gesture a lot or keep still? Do they maintain eye contact consistently, occasionally, or rarely? Do they speak fast or slow? Do their sentences flow or do they hesitate naturally even about nothing? Does their voice rise or fall in pitch as they talk normally? All of it, is baseline data. You are calibrating your instrument before you use it. Now here's the part that most people ignore. Baseline is not just visual, it's vocal. A person's voice under normal conditions has a specific rhythm, pace, pitch, and texture. When they become anxious or uncomfortable, the voice changes. It might become slightly higher. The pace might increase or slow down unusually. There might be more filler words, like, appearing where they didn't exist before, and the opposite is also true. Some people, when they are hiding something, or choosing words very carefully, become unnaturally precise. Their speech slows down. They sound almost too deliberate, as if they are selecting each word before speaking it. Both of these patterns, speeding up or slowing down, are deviations from baseline, and deviations are signals. Another truth. Baselining is a skill that gets sharper the more you practice it. At first, it takes conscious effort. You have to remind yourself, establish the baseline, watch, listen, compare. But after weeks and months of doing this, it becomes instinct. You walk into any room, you start naturally reading the environment. You calibrate automatically, and then when something shifts, when someone behaves in a way that doesn't match their normal, your brain flags it before your conscious mind even processes it. That is the first technique. Baselining and everything that follows depends on it. The second technique is one that has been studied extensively by scientists, used by intelligence agencies, and documented across dozens of cultures around the world. It's called micro-expression reading, and it operates on something the human face cannot completely control. Here is the science asterisk. In the 1960s, psychologist Paul Ekman and his colleague Wallace Friesen conducted research that would permanently change the way we understand the human face. They identified 7 universal facial expressions, emotions that are expressed the same way across every culture, every country, every era of human history. Happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, contempt, surprise. These expressions are the same, whether you are a businessman in New York, a farmer in rural India, or a child who has never watched television or been exposed to outside culture. The muscle movements that create these expressions are hardwired into human biology. And here is the critical piece that most people miss. These expressions cannot be fully suppressed. When someone feels a genuine, strong emotion, even for a fraction of a second before they control themselves, That emotion appears on their face, involuntarily, automatically. It may last for only 1/5 of a second. Or even less. You might never consciously notice it. But it happens. These are my brief involuntary flashes of genuine emotion that appear before the conscious mind has a chance to manage and control the face. Think about it. You've experienced this yourself. Someone receives news they were hoping for, but they're trying to appear professional and neutral. For just a split second, before they compose themselves, their face flashes something: relief, joy, a brief widening of the eyes, a slight upward pull of the lip corners. Gone in an instant. But it happened. Or someone hears something that angers them, but they're in a social situation where expressing anger is inappropriate. They smile and nod. But for a fraction of a second, before the smile, there was something else. A tightening around the eyes, a narrowing, a compression of the lips. It lasted less than a second. But it was real. Micro-expressions are the face telling the truth, while the person tries to manage what story they're presenting. Now, the 7 expressions and what to look for. Happiness is the one most people know, but most people read incorrectly. A genuine smile, what researchers call the Duchenne smile, engages 2 sets of muscles. The zygomatic major, which pulls the lip corners up, and the orbicularis oculi, which creates crow's feet wrinkles around the eyes and raises the cheeks. A social smile, polite but not felt, only activates the first muscle. The lips move. But the eyes don't change. Look at the eyes, not the mouth. A genuine smile lives in the eyes. A performed smile does not. This is one of the simplest ways to distinguish authentic warmth from social politeness. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Sadness is perhaps the hardest expression to fake convincingly, and the easiest to detect. When someone is suppressing it, the key muscle is the corrugator, supercilii. It pulls the inner corners of the eyebrows upward and together. This creates the characteristic oblique shape of the eyebrows in sadness. The chin may also dimple involuntarily. When someone is trying not to show sadness, they often tighten their lips, stiff their jaw, and look slightly upward. But the brow movement, that inner brow raise, is very difficult to fully suppress. Anger involves a very specific cluster. The brows lower and pull together, creating a furrowing between them. The lips compress and may narrow. The eyes take on what researchers describe as a hard stare, and there is often a redness to the face, in micro-expression form. Anger can appear as simply that brow compression for a fraction of a second, before someone replaces it with a neutral expression. Watch for it in moments of confrontation or when someone receives information they don't like. Fear shares some facial geography with surprise. Both involve the eyes widening. But fear has a distinct difference. In surprise, the mouth opens and the brows raise. In fear, the brows pull together and raise, creating a specific wrinkled pattern in the center of the forehead, and the lips stretch horizontally and thin. The eyes open wide and the upper eyelid raises, exposing more white above the iris. Fear and anxiety look different from surprise. Surprise passes quickly and is often followed by another emotion. Fear stays, or becomes quickly managed. Disgust is one of the most distinctive expressions. It begins in the nose and upper lip. The nose wrinkles. The upper lip raises on one or both sides. The eyes narrow slightly. It is an expression that says, at a biological level, something is wrong here. Something is contaminating or offensive. Disgust can be triggered not just by physical things but by ideas, by people, by information. When someone hears an idea they find deeply objectionable, disgust may flash across their face for a fraction of a second before they compose themselves. In a negotiation or conversation, that flash tells you something powerful about their real reaction. Contempt is the only asymmetrical universal expression. It appears on only one side of the face. Specifically, it's a slight tightening and raising of one lip corner, often mistaken for a smirk, but with a distinct quality. Contempt communicates superiority. It says, I am above this. I don't respect this. This is beneath me. Contempt in a micro-expression can appear and vanish in under a second. But if you catch it, it tells you something about how that person truly feels about you. Or about what you're saying, regardless of what comes out of their mouth next. Surprise is brief, the briefest of all the expressions. Open mouth, raised brows, wide eyes. And it passes immediately into whatever emotion follows: delight, fear, confusion, recognition. A prolonged surprised expression is almost certainly performed. Because genuine surprise resolves itself within seconds. Now, here is how you apply all of this. You are not trying to catalog every flicker of every face in every conversation. That's exhausting and impractical. What you are doing is developing what behavioral scientists call emotional fluency. You become comfortable reading faces the way a musician becomes comfortable reading sheet music. Not consciously decoding every symbol, but processing the information naturally, almost automatically. The way to develop this is practice. Deliberate, focused practice. One of the most effective exercises. Watch interviews, particularly high-stakes interviews, or press conferences, with the sound off. No words, just faces. Your entire focus goes to the visual channel. You start to notice movements you would never have caught while also listening to words. Another exercise. When watching a conversation in a film, a scene with emotional stakes, pause it at random moments and study the face on screen. What muscles are engaged? What expression is present? What emotion does it reflect? Do this consistently, and within months, your ability to read faces changes. It becomes a background process. You don't have to think about it. You just notice. Let me give you a real example. I was once in a conversation where someone told me they were completely comfortable with the decision we had made together. Their words were calm. Their tone was even. Their body language was open. But for a fraction of a second, maybe a quarter of a second, when I first mentioned the decision, their face did something. A brief tightening of the nose. A slight narrowing of the upper lip. Disgust. Gone immediately. Replaced by a neutral, composed expression. I knew. Whatever they were saying, something about that decision genuinely bothered them. Something they hadn't told me. 2 days later, they came back and told me they had reservations they hadn't felt comfortable raising. The micro-expression told the truth an entire conversation before the words did. That is the power of the second technique. The third technique is the one most people have never heard of. And it is arguably the most powerful of the three. It is called behavioral leakage, and it changes everything. Here is what behavioral leakage means. The human body is not a single channel of communication. It is many channels simultaneously. The face, the hands, the feet, the torso, the voice, the breath, the pace of movement, the use of space. And here is the critical psychological truth. The further a body part is from the face, the less conscious control a person has over it. Think about it. We are highly trained to manage our faces. From childhood, we learn that our faces reveal us. We learn to smile when appropriate, look attentive when expected, remain neutral when we need to. We practice facial management constantly, automatically. Our hands we manage moderately well. We know our hands are visible. We have some awareness of what they're doing. But our feet, our legs, the position of our torso, the direction our body unconsciously orients toward or away from, almost no one manages those deliberately. Almost no one thinks, what are my feet doing right now? Where is my body pointed? And because of that, the lower half of the body is where the most honest information leaks. This is behavioral leakage. The unconscious truth that escapes through the parts of the body we forget to manage. Let me give you the specific signals to watch. The first and most powerful, foot direction. Where a person's feet point reveals where their mind wants to go. When someone is genuinely engaged and comfortable in a conversation, Their feet, and often their entire body, orient toward you. Not necessarily perfectly squared, but generally facing you. When someone is anxious, uncomfortable, or wants to leave, even if their face is smiling and their words are polite, their feet will often begin to point away. Toward the door. Toward the exit. Away from you. In a group setting, foot direction is extraordinarily revealing. If you are in a group conversation, and you want to know who is genuinely invested and who wants to escape, look down. Not at faces. At feet. The person whose feet are angled toward the door is already leaving, mentally. Their face just hasn't announced it yet. Another form of leakage. Self-soothing behaviors. Asterisk when the human brain experiences stress, anxiety, or discomfort, it triggers a self-regulation response. The body tries to calm itself, and it does this through physical contact, particularly touching the face, neck, or head. Watch for this. The rubbing of the neck just below the ear, particularly on the left side, where a bundle of nerves called the vagus nerve is accessible. This is one of the most common self-soothing gestures in the human body. It slows the heart rate. It calms the nervous system. When someone suddenly touches their neck in the middle of a conversation, particularly after hearing something stressful or being asked something they don't want to answer, their body is soothing itself. Their internal state has just changed. Other self-soothing signals: rubbing the arms, touching the face repeatedly, pulling at clothing, suddenly adjusting jewelry or accessories, playing with hair. These are not random nervous habits. They are signals. The body telling you something just shifted internally. And the key is always to compare against the baseline. If this person touches their face constantly in normal conversation, that's their baseline, and it may mean very little. But if they were completely still and composed, and then suddenly began rubbing their neck the moment a specific topic came up, that deviation is information. Another critical form of leakage. The torso. The human torso, the chest. The core is the most vulnerable part of the body, and instinctively, unconsciously, people protect it. When someone feels comfortable and open, they tend to face their torso toward you, keep their arms open and away from their body, and take up space in a relaxed way. When someone becomes uncomfortable, defensive, or closed, even if their words continue calmly, watch the torso. They may angle it slightly away. They may bring their arms in, crossing them or resting them in front of the body as a subtle barrier. They may lean back, creating physical distance, even while continuing to speak. Now here is the nuance that most people miss. A crossed arm is not automatically defensive. It might be cold. It might be comfortable. It might be that person's default resting posture. This is why baseline matters. If someone was open and forward-leaning, and then after a specific exchange they crossed their arms and slightly pulled their torso back, that shift is the signal, not the crossed arms in isolation. The change? Let me give you a real example. I once watched a negotiation. Two people at a table. Words were polite, professional, reasonable on the surface, but I was watching the body. One man's feet were pointed squarely at the other person for the first 20 minutes. Then, after a specific number was mentioned, one foot quietly rotated about 30 degrees toward the door. His arms, which had been resting open on the table, slowly came in and crossed loosely across his torso. His eyes remained steady, his words continued, his face showed nothing. But his body had already made a decision. The deal didn't happen. He declined at the end. His body announced it 20 minutes before his words did. That is behavioral leakage. The body telling the truth while the mouth tells a story. Now here is the fourth form of leakage. And it is one that most people would never think to consider. It's called timing leakage. Genuine emotion is simultaneous with expression. When you see something funny, you laugh at the same time or immediately after. When you hear something surprising, surprise appears instantly. Performed emotion has a delay. Watch for the slight lag between an event and a person's reaction. If someone hears news that should cause immediate joy, but their face takes a beat to form a smile, that delay is information. The smile came after they decided to smile, not because they actually felt it. Similarly, if someone hears news that should cause surprise, but their surprised expression appears slightly too late, they may have already known. Timing leakage is subtle. It requires practice to detect. But once you can read it, you start seeing the gap between what people feel and what they choose to display, and that gap is where truth lives. Now here is the part that ties everything together. Because these three techniques, based microexpressions, and behavioral leakage are each powerful on their own, but combined, they become something extraordinary. They create what I call a complete behavioral picture. When you establish a baseline, you know what's normal for this person. When you read microexpressions, you catch involuntary flashes of genuine emotion that the face can't fully suppress. When you track behavioral leakage, you see what the body reveals through the channels the mind forgets to manage. And when all three tell the same story, when the baseline shifts, the face flashes a microexpression, and the body leaks the same emotion, you have convergence. Convergence is certainty. Think about it. One signal can be explained away. A crossed arm might be cold. A looked away eye might be distraction. A neck touch might be a habit. But when the baseline shifts, and the face flashes contempt for a fraction of a second, and the feet turn toward the door, and the torso closes in, and the voice slows down slightly more than usual, all at the same moment, that is not coincidence. That is a system of signals telling the same truth from 5 different angles. That is convergence. And convergence rarely lies. This is what separates someone who has watched a YouTube video about body language from someone who has genuinely developed the ability to read people. The difference is not memorizing signals. The difference is reading systems. Reading clusters. Reading the convergence of multiple channels simultaneously. Now, I want to address something important, because when people learn these skills, one of 2 things often happens. The first, they become paranoid. They start seeing signals everywhere. They misread normal behavior as deception. They assume everyone around them is hiding something. They become suspicious, guarded, and exhausted. No, that is the wrong application of these skills. Reading people is not about catching everyone in a lie. Most people, most of the time, are not lying. Most signals you will detect are anxiety, not deception. Discomfort, not malice. Sadness, not manipulation. The correct application of these skills is empathy. When you can truly read another person's internal state, not what they say, but what they feel, you become a more understanding, more present, more emotionally intelligent person. You know when someone needs space. You know when someone is struggling but won't say so. You know when someone is more affected by a situation than they're letting on. That knowledge, used with care and compassion, makes you a better friend, a better partner, a better colleague, a better human being. The second wrong thing people do, they become obvious. They stare at feet. They scrutinize faces so intensely that the other person becomes uncomfortable without knowing why. They become clinical when they should be present. The goal is to do all of this naturally, as a background process. The way an experienced musician can play a complex piece, while also holding a conversation, because the technical work has been internalized so deeply that it no longer requires conscious effort. You develop this skill in your private observations first. You watch interactions you're not part of. You study recordings. You practice in low-stakes environments. Over time, it becomes a natural layer of awareness that runs quietly underneath your normal social engagement. You're present. You're warm. You're engaged. And simultaneously, in the background, you're reading. That combination, genuine human presence combined with precise behavioral awareness, is rare. And it gives you access to a level of understanding about other people that most people will never have. Let me give you the most important truth of this entire video. The reason most people cannot read others well has nothing to do with intelligence or natural ability. It has to do with where their attention is. Most people, in a conversation, are primarily focused on themselves. What they're going to say next, how they're coming across, whether the other person likes them, what they should add to the conversation, how long until it's their turn to speak. When your attention is primarily on yourself, you miss almost everything about the other person. Reading people requires a fundamental shift in where your attention lives during an interaction, not inward, outward. Genuine attention to another person, to their face, their body, their voice, their energy, is both a skill and a gift. When people feel truly seen, truly attended to, they feel something rare and powerful. And this brings us full circle to a deeper truth. The reason these techniques are called dark psychology is not because they are evil. It's because they operate below the level of ordinary awareness. They are hidden, unseen, running beneath the surface of every interaction. But the most powerful application of this knowledge is not darkness. It is light. When you genuinely understand how to read another person, when you can see past their words and their performance to what they actually feel, you can meet them there, in the real place, not the place they're presenting. And when someone meets you in the real place, when they sense that you actually see them, actually understand them, actually get it, they feel something most people rarely feel. Seen, understood, real. That connection, built not on performance or charm, but on genuine perception, is the most powerful form of human bond that exists. It feels strange, perhaps, to think that the same skill that intelligence analysts use to detect deception can also be what makes you the most deeply trusted person in someone's life. But it's not magic, it's psychology.